Good afternoon, everybody. I think Professor Sanjay Mukherjee has joined us.
Yes, I have.
Yeah. Welcome, Professor Mukherjee. Welcome to the webinar on the virtual mode to Berhampur University Postgraduate Department of English, Berhampur University, and Shruti Das, at present the head of the department. Have been waiting for the last few years to listen to your wonderful lecture on Renaissance women. So I will request, without delay, we will go into your talk. And at the end of your talk, if you wish, there will be a question and answer session for about 15 minutes. So how long will your talk be for?
I plan to take around 45 minutes at the most, 45 to 50 minutes at the
Thank
most.
you, sir. Thank you, sir. Do you have a PPT or something, or would you like to talk? Just like that.
Yeah, I do have a PPT to share.
Thank you so much. You can share your screen. I would request our colleague, Dr. Balabhadra Tripathi, to introduce you. Dr. Balabhadra Tripathi, kindly introduce the lecture. I request Dr. Balabhadra Tripathi to kindly introduce Professor Mukherjee.
Good afternoon, Professor Mukherjee, and welcome to the Department of English, Berhampur University. I have the pleasure of introducing Professor Mukherjee today. Professor Sanjay Mukherjee is the head Department of English and CLC Saurashtra University. Mukherjee's publications include books including English literature, the Roman period, survey and introduction, critical source and colonialism, published 2000, he tried to speak very in India and among those from the University of British Columbia, Canada. 11, he was awarded the SI category academic can say he has been a doctoral researcher so far, working under him for the PhD. Also awarded with the Government Monk Research for the Saurashtra University, Rajkot. His academic areas of interest include literature and cultural studies, poetry, and his latest publications include a chapter entitled Individual at the Cultural Center, Shakespeare, in the book Approaching Shakespeare Through Literary Theory and Adaptations. There is also the co-editor, a chapter entitled Of the Empire and Europe, George in the book Image of India, Prism of British Literature Constructs, where he was also the co-editor. The forward to Hardy's poems, a study and a translation of Premchand's short stories, Satyagraha in the Hindu and Premchand, the communist, edited by Muhammad Asad. He has been creatively active, though infrequently, and received the first prize at All India Poetry Contest organized by the Quest Literary Magazine in 1995. His poem, Speaking of a Paradise, found a special mention and a Distinguished Poet 2016 certificate by the jury of the 5th Rabindranath Tagore Award organized by the International Poetry Council in May 2016. And 9 of his poems have been published in the international online magazine Visual Words. Today, he is going to talk on remembering the women writers of the Renaissance. And all of it, thank you, sir. Professor Mukherjee now.
Thank you, Professor Tripathi, for your kind words. Am I audible to all of you?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Right. And
You may share your screen.
Is my screen now visible to you?
No.
Okay. Let me try again. It is telling me here you are presenting to everyone. Is it now visible to you?
You are presenting to everyone is showing here too, but
Yes, sir, the screen is visible. The slide is saying preamble.
all right, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, yes, it's visible.
All right. Thank you, dear participants, Madam Head of the Department, other faculty members of the PG Department of English, Berhampur University, my first contact with you all. And I'm really happy to connect with you through this talk.
Me too. Me too.
When I was asked to deliver a talk a few days ago, I was a little apprehensive whether within such a short time I would be able to present anything sensible. I also then realized that actually the women in the world, and certainly women in India, and today being Women's Day, are often called to work at far shorter notices than this. And I then thought that this is really unbecoming of my part to just say that I can't present anything or speak to you. I also recollected that as a way of a preamble, if I may say, talk about the choice of my topic, that way back in 2004, I read a paper about Renaissance women writers in Nainital, and the then head and founder of my department, renowned scholar Professor Avdesh Kumar Singh, who was the keynote speaker there, liked my paper and had asked me that would you send it to the journal Critical Practice. And eventually, after 2 years, sometime in 2006, a paper of mine on this area was published in Critical Practice. Professor Tripathi just mentioned my invitation from the Center for Women's and Gender Studies, University of British Columbia, Canada. Incidentally, this paper of mine got noticed there, and I was sent an invitation from the University of British Columbia in 2008, the Center for Women's Studies, Women's and Gender Studies there. I still feel that a lot of work needs to be done in this area. As a matter of a preamble, let me also say that the Department of English and Comparative Literary Studies, Saurashtra University, Rajkot, where I am presently a professor and head right now, got the UGC SAP to work on Renaissance literatures, Indian Renaissance literatures in English, Hindi, and Gujarati way back in 2001/2. And during the SAP program, when we got the SAP, we were one of the few English departments, certainly in Gujarat, We were the only department in Gujarat and very few English departments in the Western India to have got the UGC Special Assistance Program, SAP DRS. As part of the research on Renaissance, I got more and more interested in this area. And I started doing my own reading on this. And as a result, whatever I present to you, whatever I wrote earlier, and is as a result of this ongoing interest in this area, which again, as I reiterate, there is a lot of work to be done, and as some of my slides might make it clear to you. You see, the word, since we speak of Renaissance, and we all know that in Europe, Italy was the first place with the dawn of the Renaissance, where it was called La Rinascita, or the French word Renaissance, or I don't know whether I'm pronouncing it rightly. The English word often used by critics like Matthew Arnold, Renaissance, all mean rebirth. And what struck me during my study about 15, 18 years ago, when I started working on this, what struck me was that this field, talking about rebirth, flowering of knowledge, learning, art, culture, is suddenly severed off from the birth givers, that is, the women contributors. And that actually started my curiosity and interest to know. You will all agree probably that the first question for women or the feminist movement has always been the visibility, or the very simple question, where are the women in important stages of cultural history, civilizational history? So my question was also the same, that where are the women in this Renaissance? And that started, in fact, my whatever humble journey of knowledge in this area. And this is a few things that I would like to share with you as a result of my ongoing interest. Again, I hope my slides and the slide changes are visible now properly. This slide that I'm presenting to you talks about the twofold cult about women. Yeah. So you can see that from the medieval period onwards, whatever we know, and even when Renaissance began, the pre-existing ideas about women were predominantly two. And we are talking about the European context. The first was as symbolized by Eve, and Eve was supposed to have held a holy communion, unholy communion with Satan. That is, so she also somehow was labeled with the evil. And along with that, there is another story about Mary Magdalene, who was the sinner, prostitute, and Jesus cured her. Again, the word evil and evil spirits are associated with Mary Magdalene. So one association with women, even today we hear news about women being branded as witches, and they are tortured, and we still get to see such news clips in India, even in the 21st century. So one idea associated with women was about that they are on the side of the evil. They are sinners. They are double sinners. They are temptresses, and so on. Exactly diametrically opposite is the other idea, which is symbolized by Virgin Mother Mary. That is, they are the most exalted, they are the purest, they are the women par excellence. So, in between these two diametrically opposite ideas about women, the human women have also made their contribution. The women in flesh and blood, the women like any other human beings, especially like any other man, they have also made their contributions. And this is what my talk is about. But again, if we look at some of the very curious practices during Renaissance period, continuing from the medieval times, you will find that wife beating was an accepted thing, and a man was allowed to so-called chastise his wife because she is part of his household. And we have examples like I have mentioned, for example, the Taming of the Shrew, although Shakespeare is actually critiquing the entire practice, but nevertheless presenting and open public punishment of women went on during Queen Elizabeth's time. Also, when Queen Elizabeth was the Queen of England, that also happened there. And the institutions primarily that formed ideas on women, about women, all the means at their hand. They were in the court, they were literate, educated, they had the means of airing their views with a lot of command, and they took certain things, their opinions, as if for granted. And the aristocracy generally regarded women as subsidiary to their asset, the land. You will all agree and recollect that land was a primary resource during that time. It is still called real estate, and money, paper currency, is often subordinated even today to the real estate. So for aristocracy, the primary asset was land, and their county, their kingdom often was ornamented with beautiful women, and so women were often ornamental, and they were certainly subordinate to this primary asset, land. And as Eileen Powers says, that it might with truth be said that the accepted theory about the nature and sphere of women was the work of the classes least familiar with the greater their opinions and familiar with majority of the women. This is the dichotomy, this is the irony that you find. You might question that, well, with Renaissance came humanism, with humanism came ideas about educating women. So did humanism help? with whatever little finding that I have had, and I will mention a few texts also from which I have borrowed my ideas, and they would be, the names would be available to you. Uh, I think that in exceptional cases, education, in very rare cases, education came to women could avail of denied education. Uh, so overall, education for men in the aiding men, I mean, broadening his horizons, his intellect, make him more intelligent, would make him able to take powerful decisions associated with bettering herself, bettering her behavior, her morals, her values and principles. So it was a very private affair. It was very limited thing with education for women, as and in contrast to men. And I have and certain things. It's a fine. If if a woman of eminent virtue of mind should add even moderate skill in learning, I think she will gain more real good than if she obtained the riches of Croesus and the beauty of Helen. So once again, we were discussing just a little while ago that talking about women as part of assets, richness, uh, and of course, there have been women associated with ornamental beauty. And so these two things again becomes very, very stereotypical, as you can see. As against these humanists, look at this lady's thoughts. And here I'm entering into my sharing of significant women of the Renaissance, pre-Renaissance, and during the Renaissance. And this is Christine de Pizan or Pizan, whose voice we hear. She is one of the earliest women who supported herself and her family, especially after her husband's death. She supported herself and her family through writing. She was a writer, an author of the court of King Charles VI of France, and then she was a court lady as a writer, as an intelligent woman in several courts of French dukes, and we have till now known. I have always maintained, as have the women scholars who have dug up the works of the women, that when we speak of the works of women, talk about, we always have to say, as of now, we this is what she is opining. That if it were customary to send little girls to school and teach them the same subjects as are taught to boys. Now, this is important. We still believe that certain subjects are not meant for girls. Engineering, for example, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering still is a predominant domain for men. We think that, oh, going into that. If they, indeed, maybe they would understand them better, she says. If they understand them less, it is because they do not go out and see so many different places and things, but stay home and mind their own work. She just stops short of saying that they are forced to stay home. It is because they stay home, because they are not allowed to go outside and gain exposure. And there is what she says, for there is nothing that teaches a reasonable creature so much as the experience of many different things. So girls are blinkered, they have a very narrow view of exposure to life, whereas men have everything, the entire vast world. And this is what she is saying, that why can't girls be sent to schools and taught the same subjects that boys are? So we just mentioned Queen Elizabeth, and we said that even during her reign, so a natural question might come. So all this was happening and the women were marginalized and never thought of when they were really powerful women like Queen Elizabeth I on the throne. What was happening? What was their role of ladies, such powerful ladies? And you see, this is a very interesting thing, and I have given my citation from the Norton Anthology of English Literature, Volume 1, where it is mentioned, this very interesting detail is mentioned, that when Queen Elizabeth came to power, the predominant idea was still that women cannot rule. And why can't women rule? Because the faculty of rational thought, the intellect, was not there in women. It was absent in women. What was there in women? They had emotions, they had sentiments, feelings, etc. But rational thought, proper intellectual decisions to run a kingdom, that was not there. That couldn't be there in women. So what happened when Elizabeth, a very intelligent lady, and her trusted Privy Council, as it was called, and I've put two names there, like Lord Burleigh and Francis Walsingham, and they invented and spread, since women were only supposed to have emotions, they invented what is called a cult of love, an emotional cult, and they associated it with the Virgin Mother Mary. And so Virgin Mother Mary and the parallel Virgin Queen Elizabeth, Mother Mary's love for infant Jesus is equated with Queen Elizabeth's love for her children, the citizens. And so this love, however, was not considered to be residing in the physical body, the body natural, but it was in the body politic. That is, in that faculty which allowed her as a mother to manage or look after the well-being of her children, like actually in a household a mother does, looks after the well-being of her children. This is the parallel that is drawn. So the body natural is not so important, but the body politic is. The body natural is subject to failings like all flesh and blood is, but the body politic was higher. It transcended the body natural. It was timeless. It was perfect. And in political terms, therefore, Elizabeth being a woman, that did not matter. That was beside the point. This is a very interesting thing. But what you can see that Elizabeth as well as her Privy Council had to work through the existing notions about women during that time. They could work out something, but they were still overwhelmingly pressurized by the prevalent thought that women and rationality, women and intellectual ideas cannot go together. It is again such backdrop then when I said as a personal question I had, that where are the women of during the Renaissance, where are the women of the Renaissance? I was very pleasantly surprised and delighted when I first came across this essay by Joanna the Women. And it is there, if you yourself, if you start working in this area, you will realize that all these works, the works that I have put across or the works that you will come across, you can frame them from the late 1970s onwards, only 1970s onwards. Actually, majority of the work, this is a very early work by Bredenthal and Kunz, 1977. Majority of the work, they start coming out from the 1980s. Now I am putting a few works here. This is where I have borrowed my ideas. This is where I have been helped. For earlier also, in my own personal research, and these are the works. For example, this is a work in 1987, Women Writers of the Renaissance and Reformation, edited by Katharina Wilson. This is another work by Margaret King. This time, there was a creator in heaven, and the next creator on earth was a man, the poet. The poet was significantly a man. The poet could not be thought like God the Father, could not be thought to be a woman. Similarly, the creator on earth, it was impossible to think that there could be women poets. So this is a work especially on women poets of the Renaissance. And here are some Renaissance women writers that within this short span of time that we have, we can talk about a little bit. I have kind of arranged them chronologically. And many of these dates I have put, for example, a question mark against Isabella Whitney. Please note that many of these dates by literary historian, feminist scholars. There is a year there, and there is not but work class. Isabella Whitney is slightly upper middle, so middle getting divided into lower and upper, and the country. It is interesting to say, for example, about education more freely if there was a supportive father, brother, husband. For example, the quintessential Renaissance man, Philip Sidney, his sister Mary Sidney was equally well read. In fact, we know about Philip Sidney today because of Mary Sidney. When Philip Sidney died because of a battle wound, his study was full of scattered with his writings, papers. And we are talking about time when there are physical papers, not neatly put under documents and things in the laptop or desktop where we have folders managed. And it is Mary Sidney who collated, brought together, made sense of it, and posthumously published works by Philip Sidney, because of which Philip Sidney is often known as a fountainhead of English criticism when we talk about England, with his defense of poesy, for example. So aristocratic women, for example, if they had support by men, they had education. It was more difficult for the working class. They often had to fight for education with their own initiatives. So for them, against the men in their family to get education. For the nuns, they had to be literate to a certain extent, but they were strictly monitored, very confined, parochial education we speak of about this class of women. The courtesans are like we have in India, Umrao Jan Ada, for example, highly talented poet, dancer, musician, and very beautiful. This is a class of women, a very small class of women, where approximately, and I stress approximately, there is a modicum of a semblance of equality between the courtesan and her lord. This is so it's an interesting class, and we are talking about. I'll be taking from the fifth person here, Isabella Whitney. I think when, as students of literature, when we start knowing the Elizabethan period, Renaissance period, I don't know how many English departments teach Isabella Whitney. What do we know? How many of our students doing BA, MA know about Isabella Whitney? Where is she? We know more about, for example, Afraben. Afraben, that too, because we know her from Virginia Woolf. And again, when was she born? When did she die? Still no idea. Very sketchy idea. She is considered to be the first woman poet and professional writer. And yet we don't know much about when she was born, when she died. This much is now clear, that she is the first English woman to have penned and published secular poetry, not religious poetry, secular poetry under her own name. She was brave enough to put her name. But how many works? We still have no idea. She was this daring woman when she ventured to live as a single woman in the city of London. And when she did so, there were only 3 avenues for single women or women, basically, for work. One, she could be a servant. There were many noble families, barons and lords, and in their household she could be a servant. She could be a street vendor selling different wares, or she could be a prostitute, she could be a sex worker. And against this is a lady, she ventures to earn her living out of writing. And as we were just discussing, that we have started coming to know about her from 1980s. The first proper critical attention on her was a work by Betty Travetsky in 1980. And this is interesting. There is this woman, Kate Bradley, a white woman, a young white woman who's writing in 2018 about her own experience of a single working woman, youngish white woman in London. And she says, as night falls on London, the urban landscape becomes a no woman's land. To go out alone after dark is to take a journey through my own nervous system. Kate Bradley speaks about, in London today there are stalkers. In London today there are rapists, and a young woman is not really safe on the streets of London during certain time in certain localities. So if this is true in 2018, we are talking about, you can see the dates there. Isabella Whitney's canonical texts, right now there are 3. Look at the writing. The copy of a letter lately written in meter by a young gentlewoman to her unconstant lover. This is the kind of a thing which at that point of time when she was doing it must have been really problematic. And also she hierarchizes the love of the lover, the woman. or on the grounds that she has the purest of all emotions, and that is love. The purest of all emotions is available only to the woman, on the basis of which she hierarchizes the woman over men. I mentioned a nun, Saint Teresa of Jesus, who was, as we mentioned, wrote like so many other nuns under the strictest monitoring of the church fathers. And therefore, many of the writings that the nuns wrote had implicitly the, the acceptance that women are sinners and so on. Yet, her writing reflected upon this problematic thing called sainthood. What does it, when human beings turn into saint, what does it mean? How is the process? What happens? Especially when she knows from her own experience that hundreds of young women come to the nunneries. They are women, they are very poor women. At such a time, at such an age where it is very natural to like food, like dresses, when it is so natural to have desires, what is it to come to a nunnery? What is it to give up? What is it to renounce the possessions? And therefore, her writing, this tension of this walking on this narrow, difficult path of piety or surrendering oneself to God. What is this thing? This tension that she reflects in her writing. This is which is very remarkable. And she would often talk about in very homely similes of gardening and watering the plants and such things to describe the interaction between a human being and the divine force. Her famous works are, as of now, four: the Book of Life, the Way of Perfection, Book of Foundations, and the Dwelling Places of the Interior Castle. This has become very famous. This is, as I said, Anna Bynes comes from a tailor family, a lower middle class, and she is a very well-known woman in Europe who was part of the Catholic Counter-Reformation. She held very strong opinions against Martin Luther. She coined the word Luthery. She accused Martin Luther of being a wolf in a sheep's garb. And her lifelong mission was to impart education to working, lower class, working class women. And this brings us actually, and I am almost towards the end of my time, it's coming to be 1:30, Vittoria Colonna, an aristocratic lady, a friend of Michelangelo, one who has been mentioned by the great in the great work Ariosto mentions in Orlando Furioso. She held a relationship of a friend with Michelangelo, and with so many poems and so on. If I may read out now just a few things and end my talk in a literary manner, I think it would be proper. Here is what Ariosto talks about. He wonders, when he is to write about women, how many shall he choose? And then he says, I will choose only one, but will so choose that envy will be entirely confounded. For none of the others will be troubled if I pass over them and praise this one alone. This woman has not only made herself immortal with a sweet style that has not been surpassed, but whomever she speaks or writes about, she can draw from the tomb and give eternal life. Vittoria Colonna was a patron of artists also, by the way. And this is what Ariosto writes about her, Vittoria Colonna. Um, when Michelangelo has to reflect upon his friendship, what does he say about Vittoria Colonna? Let's look at this. A man within a woman? No, rather a god. Speaks through her mouth. Look at again the way he starts with a man within a woman. And then he corrects, no, rather a god. But again, God is an entity who is a male. Speaks through her mouth. And then he says, and I, having heard her, am no longer my own master. So with these poetic words, I would like to bring my talk to a close, keeping within time. And if there are observations, comments, questions, I shall be happy to take them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for sharing.
Who are majority of my audience, ma'am?
There are people from, I think, all over Odisha, and some people from outside of Odisha. And here you can see my students here in this room.
Hi.
So they are, say hello. And give a big hand to a brilliant lecture.
I hope you enjoyed. I hope it made some sense to you all.
They did, they definitely did. And it was very, very interesting because their knowledge of Renaissance is limited to the stereotypical writers that we read. And so all of them were taking down notes and they were rapt in attention. Thank you so much, Professor Mukherjee, for this brilliant, brilliant talk. And we all enjoyed it. There are professors from Sambalpur University listening to you, some from West Bengal. Professor Savita Tripathi from Sambalpur University, she's here, and Professor Aloka Patel is also here. So would you like to ask a question or something, Professor Tripathi, Savita Tripathi? Would you like to make a comment or something?
Thank you, Shruti. Thank you. I congratulate all women of the world on this International Day of Celebration. It's a
Thank you,
Women's Day.
ma'am.
And I congratulate Professor Mukherjee for delivering such an illuminating lecture, and that too, the first lecture by I should not call it gender discrimination. A male,
Thank
actually,
you for including me as the first speaker. Thank you.
That is the reason. We do not want gender discrimination because we need the male and the female creation.
I am aware of that. This is a post-feminist stance that we are taking beyond compartments.
That is why you are the first speaker of the day, sir. You must have.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
that's the thing. That's I congratulate you, sir, because you have empowered the woman by inaugurating the lecture, inaugurating the session, and really, sir, it's really let the students participate. They are the real women who are going to uh, preside over other other programs, and let the student participate, sir. And thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Thank you very much, sir. I am a little bit sick. That's why I'm not able to talk for a long time.
Please get well soon. Please get well soon, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you for giving an opportunity to all women of Odisha to listen to you. All universities, there are members from all the universities of Odisha.
Oh,
So,
thank you. It's my privilege. My
yeah,
privilege.
thank you. Bye.
It is our privilege to have you on board here, sir. Thank you so much for agreeing to talk within such a short time, and it was a brilliant lecture. Our students want to know something, that
Yes, please.
why were the women of the Renaissance not allowed to use their names, and how could some become bold to use their names when they were writing? And were these poems published posthumously or during their lifetime? And how did the society take it?
Okay. As I gave the chart of the classes of women, it was easier for women of the aristocratic class to take their name and write under their name. It was more difficult for people like Anna Bynes, for people like Isabella Whitney to take their name. You see, naming and naming or labeling, people have been discussing this aspect that the religious institution church names you, right? Or it used to. Okay, so that also is given, especially it is also given to women, and therefore since as we just discussed, writing, creating is only a male creator, is the idea of a creator. So therefore even people like George Eliot had to take a name. So this is something that we have to really ponder upon, why exactly they did it, because it was the practice that probably if you take your own name, you might be severely criticized, you might be punished, and you would not be read. Point is that you are writing to get a readership. But if you write that a woman's name, probably you will not get any readership, because most of the readers, most of the literate people were men. Again, that also we have to see. Today, from the reader's respect point of view, reader's response theory point of view, so most of the readers, most of the literate were men. So they would also like to read men. So this was a conditioning at that point of time, against which gradually some women could still fight and come out. This is what I can say.
Thank you, sir. There is another question from the students that they're reading Hamlet at the moment.
Correct.
So the first year students. So when well, the Queen was in power, Queen Elizabeth, how could Shakespeare write "Frailty, thy name is woman" and get away with it?
Very good, very good. I think students ought to ask these questions. That is why you will see I brought in Elizabeth in my discussion. Elizabeth actually could rule because she had a very good, small, loyal group of men with her. Her privy council included a committed men with her. So the prevailing notion of what women were capable of doing or what they could do, you see, if you read the history just before Elizabeth, her own sister is called Murderous Mary, right? She is so so that sets an example that women actually cannot rule. Women are incapable of ruling, and that was the prevailing notion. Now Shakespeare, coming to Shakespeare, Shakespeare often critiques the prevailing notion. He does not, don't take it that when he writes it he is asserting it or he is underlining it. You see, look at his portrayals of women. For example, when we say, since you are talking about Hamlet, what is Hamlet's major problem? Hamlet cannot understand the behavior of his mother. Why is his mother so soon after the death of his father, why has she married his uncle? Now that he can understand somebody's death, father is a father figure, can die, he is a university wit, but he cannot understand the behavior of his mother. Now, sometimes, dear students, you have to read through silences also. Not what is written, but what is not written. Now, if we ask, if I as a teacher or if your teacher asks you, was Hamlet's mother happy as a wife? It is not mentioned. But why did she so quickly marry the uncle. Probably she was given more respect, more love, more care by the uncle than the husband. Maybe the husband took her for granted. Okay. So there are certain things that Shakespeare is great in his silences or reading between the lines. We have to ask such questions also and when we read Shakespeare.
Excuse me, sir, do you think that Murderous Mary was the kind of, idea behind Shakespeare's Lady Macbeth?
Oh, well, okay. So that is one way of looking at it. Yes. Another way of looking at it is um, some of the women, Renaissance women poets, and especially, say, Vittoria Colonna, through her poems, they say that war is created by men. And if we remove men from important positions, there would be no war, there would be peace on earth, and there would be prosperity. So what probably Shakespeare might be also thinking is that why do we say that only men can murder? Why can't women murder? Why can't women take things into their hands and be strong to the extent of removing obstacles through murder? So this can be another interpretation that you can think of.
Yeah, that's the silence that we can
Yes.
talk or we can try to interpret. Thank you
Yes.
so much, sir. Thank you for giving us so much of your time. Are
Uh,
there any more questions?
my,
Anyone?
there is a question on GB Shaw and feminism and okay, I mean certain things are right now not within the scope of our talk. Ibsen, GB Shaw, feminism can brought in anywhere, and there are so many women scholars here. I would like to have certain answers from them, or let this discussion continue. Writers and their opinion about women, uh, canonical writers, for example. We are these days we are talking even about how T.S. Eliot was anti-Jew, for example, or what kind of opinion that he held about women, so on and so forth. So this would start us looking at literature from the other perspective also, and that would serve the real purpose.
Thank you so much. I think you have answered most of the questions. Participants, do you have any questions to ask? Our students are all here and they would like to say a big thank you to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care. All the best to you. Bye bye.
So we'll have you here after the pandemic is over. Please
Oh,
come to
it
our
would be.
department. It would be an honor for us.
Yeah. We would have an exchange. Certainly, we would like you to also come here.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Bye bye. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye, sir. I will be emailing you, sir, or talking to you. All right.
Sure, madam. Bye,
Have a
ma'am.
nice day, sir. Thank you.
Bye. Bye, ma'am.